Are you unsure of what to say or how to answer when questions or discussions come up concerning the Bible and today's worldview? Well, maybe it's time to step up and step into your faith. Hello, and welcome to the Chaplain's Corner, where we expound upon the truth of God's Word, present actual scientific, archaeological, and historical arguments, and provide common sense answers in facing the challenges of today's anti-biblical arguments. We hope you will join us in learning more about defending your faith with truth, just for the record. And now, here's Chaplain Randall.
Good afternoon and welcome once more to all of you who are regular listeners and any newcomers out there that may be tuning in. I know there are people driving out there at lunch break. Hopefully you'll come across this station and this will interest you and you'll keep joining us. Shout outs to my wife Mads, of course, and that's short for Madeline, and our beautiful son Judah, and regular listeners, of course, including Carlene, Kimmy, and Joan. Missed you at church Sunday, Kimmy, but it was nice seeing your sister. Hey, how come you two can't get her to come all the time? And my friend Dino in Denver, and Melissa and Tom, of course, and Norm, and everyone at the First Baptist Food Bank today. God bless you. I'm sorry if I left anybody out. If I did, you'll just have to contact me and let me know. I'm asking for our listeners to please pray for and keep in prayer our friend Melissa with her migraines. And as she and Tom are going to be moving soon, they're trying to pack up and sell things, and they're headed over to Denmark for a couple of years. Now, also, Darlene has an unspoken prayer request. Raj is going through chemo. Jonathan with health issues after his vaccination boosters, and for the Lord to strengthen his faith and give direction in his life. Also, my Uncle Carl, as he prepares to go to glory, to home, pray that the pain meds will keep him comfortable. And I just spoke with him this morning, and my wife and I and son are headed back to Missouri next week to visit with him and say our goodbyes. And finally, I ask prayer for an EMT and Christian sister I met the other day named Alexis for clarity and direction in her life. Now, last week we were talking about Noah's flood and the evidence that supports it. And there's been kicked around and questioned as to how it was possible for people to live so long, also back in the early Old Testament days, even over 900 years we see with Methuselah and Adam. And now we don't know if that was everyone or just select folks. But it seems plausible that if the patriarchs were living that long, other people too possibly lived for longer periods. The question is, why do we not live so long today? And how was it that they were living so long back then? I guess that's two questions, isn't it? One is because once sin entered into the world, due to Adam turning away from God to believe and follow Eve and eating the fruit God told them not to, as the Bible tells us, mankind became spiritually separated from God. Our earthly body became spiritually dead. And one act of sin also made us start to die physically. Man was meant to live forever. That's how he created us. God did not create us to die, or in his image to die, rather, but Adam and Eve, they were perfect, but made with free will, which comes with its own set of understanding and consequences of reaping and sowing. Now, God knew his creation would one day sin. That is the price and chance taken with free will. But that is another topic. So let me get back to the subject at hand. Number two, I believe the more people on earth, the more acts of sin. The more acts of sin, the more or worse the consequences. Notice all the family line from Adam down to Noah, their lifespans become less and less. And the sin in mankind greater and greater until God put his proverbial foot down and said, enough. I will destroy the earth's inhabitants who have turned against me and start anew with only the faithful ones, which were Noah and his family. Now there are virtually, before we get back to what we were talking about last week with the flood, there are virtually two schools of Christian thought or belief of the second day of creation, Genesis 1, 6 through 8. One is the greenhouse effect. And this comes from what is called rakia in the Hebrew, and that is separated two bodies of water, one above and one below, forming a dome of moisture around the atmosphere, causing a greenhouse effect, is one theory, whereby harmful ultraviolet rays from the sun were blocked out and the whole earth would be a green and floral paradise where everything grew. And some things grew to immense sizes, like dinosaurs, for example, which are just lizards. Basically, lizards continue to grow every year they are alive. So if something like that is living for, say, up to or even over 100 years, it's going to be quite large, and mankind would thrive with longevity as well. Number two theory is the Bible tells us it was on the second day of creation where God made the expanse or firmament. And this number two theory is that the rakia, which is a Hebrew word, R-A-Q-I-A, but it's spelled rakia, which is referring to just the globe we live on, not the atmosphere above. And this is the more prevalent thought today with scholars and creation scientists, that rakia, which in definition means something that is solid and firm, the firmament, or rather earth, so that there is water above the rakia and water below it, is what verse 7 says. And then on the third day, verses 9 and 10, the water below the rakia is gathered to one place to form the sea and allow the dry land to appear. Now, the translations become a little convoluted because in the Hebrew Bible, heaven is sometimes used as a synonym for firmament, and the Hebrew rakia to describe the dome-shaped covering over the earth that separated the heavenly waters above from the earthly waters beneath, whereas the firmament referred specifically to the canopy covering the earth. Heaven often had a broader meaning, referring to all that was above the earth, including the firmament. And that comes from Mitchell Reddish in his book Heaven, through Anchor Bible Dictionary, or description rather, not book. But now in trying to understand this is from David Neiman in the Supercalian Sea, written in 1969. The description given in Genesis 1, 6 through 7 is of the creation of the heaven indicates clearly that the Hebrew cosmologist conceived the sky to be a rakia, a solid material stretched out, which contained within its upper surface the waters above. Old Testament men saw that inverted bowl we call the sky as a solid crystalline material above which the waters which are above the firmament were contained, and within those solid transparent within whose solid transparent mass the heavenly luminaries performed the mechanical function assigned to them by the Creator. Again, that was from David Neiman from the Supercalian Sea. But we come a long way since 1969, and let me explain the rakia. It talks about water above and water below, which the prevalent thought today is that the Earth's core, which is hot, is heated, and then there's a body of water, and then above that is the rakia, which is a body of rock, and up above that is the other body of water. So there's rock separating the two bodies of water. And last week we left off with the hydroplate theory. Now, day 2 of creation week, water covered the earth. Then rakia separated liquid water above from liquid water below. And the scientific evidence during creation week, a layer of water was below Earth's crust. Earth's surface waters were above the crust. Because the crust was initially so flat, those surface waters covered the entire Earth. Of course, this is theory because nobody was eyewitness to that can testify to it. But when you look at it, this theory makes a lot more sense than the theory of evolution or the Big Bang theory or any other theories that come up that are anti-biblical or not from a biblical perspective. Creation scientists use science to come to their conclusions in the theories, okay? Now, day 3 of creation week, the waters below the heavens were gathered into one place and the dry land appeared. The rakia, Earth's 200 million square mile rock crust rested on a layer of trapped subterranean water. That's what I was saying before. There was a body of water below, and then the rakia. And the heaviest, densest, or thickest portions of the crust rapidly sank into subterranean water, forming depressions at Earth's surface. Because a fixed volume of water was trapped under the crust, the displaced subterranean water lifted the highest portions of the crust out of the surface water, and dry land appeared. Genesis 1:9 says the water above the crust then drained into the depressions, forming seas. Now, it did not rain before the flood. Instead, there was a mist that used to rise from the earth and water the whole surface of the ground. That's Genesis 2, 5, and 6. And note, for water to become a mist, heat must be added to the water. For this to happen uniformly and regularly over the whole earth requires huge amounts of continuously generated heat from inside the earth. And the modern scientists have determined the earth's core is hot. Before the flood, the subterranean water, heated by tidal pumping, quickly became supercritical. Certain minerals in the granite crust, such as quartz, readily dissolved in the supercritical water, making the lower crust porous. You'll see that in recorded ancient history in one of the books. This is, by the way, this is again from creationscience.com. Now, the heat from the tidal pumping could then rise continuously by convection through the lower crust and evaporate groundwater not connected to the subterranean water near the Earth's surface. With such a humid atmosphere, heavy dew settled to the ground each night as temperatures fell below the dew point, providing a marvelous and simple system for daily distributing pure water for all life. Not too much and not too little. This also cleaned the atmosphere and produced cooling during the day and heating during the night. So at the end of the creation week, God saw that all he had made was good, Genesis 1:31. Because Earth's radioactivity is harmful to life, radioactivity must not have been on the early Earth, as it were. Radioactivity did not exist on Earth prior to the flood. The flood produced Earth's radioactivity. Human violence and great sin had spread throughout the earth, Genesis 6, 5 through 12. And about 2,000 years after creation, all the fountains of the great deep burst open on one day, and the flood began with Geshem rain, as if floodgates in the sky had opened up. Genesis 7:11. With the rupture phrase, because the lower crust was porous, it was weaker than solid granite. The elevated pressure in the subterranean chamber from tidal pumping and in the water filling in the voids in the lower crust stretched the crust much like a stretched rubber band. Some event perhaps added even additional stress to the crust, pushing it to its failure point. A tension crack then propagated around the earth in about 2 hours, releasing subterranean water. The fountains of muddy water and rocks jetted high above the earth and became extremely cold in seconds, almost absolute zero, which would be minus 460 degrees Fahrenheit, and muddy hail falling from the super cold fountains buried and froze the mammoths that we were talking about last week. How was it that they're perfectly preserved in the ice and the snow? Now, 40 days and 40 nights of the rain ended in Genesis 7, 4 through 12. But with this flood phase, the waters of the great deep were suppressed. Sediments from the muddy water buried and eventually fossilized plants and animals. And Genesis talks about when the flood happened, there wasn't as much rain coming down as there was water coming from underneath, the subterranean water below that rakia. Floodwaters rose until the 150th day when they covered all pre-flood mountains, Genesis 7, 19 through 24. And high-pressure water continued to gush up into the floodwaters. The liquefaction sorted sediments and dead plants and animals. Salt domes, coal, oil, and methane began forming. 150th day, the wind passed over the earth, and water slowly began to subside. The ark landed on the mountain of Ararat, Genesis 8, 1 through 4. Now, with the continental drift phase, the mid-Atlantic ridge buckled up, and the Atlantic floor rose. The Pacific plate subsided. It was all about the distribution of weight and what it was talking about before, where it became porous in certain places and not others. So the hydroplates accelerated downhill, sliding on a layer of lubricating water, so to speak. And hours later, the massive hydroplates decelerated and crashed. They were crushed, thickened, buckled, and heated in a powerful compression event. Overthrusting occurred in some places. Continents took on their present shapes. As mountains buckled upward, all within an hour, air was displaced, causing a great wind. The earth began a slow 34 to 57 degree roll. So the poles shifted. And that's how we have the ice caps now on the North and the South Pole. 150th to the 371st day, the passenger stayed on the ark. And on the 371st day, the ark was offloaded. And from then on, the earth divided in the recovery phase. Hostile environment began. Earthquakes, melting in the inner earth, ice age, continental shifting, and ring of fire, flood basalts, and volcanoes. Ocean trenches and methane hydrates formed. The water drained, the vegetation reestablished. At a lower sea level, facilitated land migration and formed table mounts and submarine canyons. Plateaus were lifted hydraulically. The breaching of natural dams carved large continental canyons, such as the Grand Canyon. Now, I always thought it was strange. How did certain animals get to certain places? Like the island of Australia, for crying out loud. It's a huge continent. But how in the world are there kangaroos there? How is there a wombat there? How are there all these animals there how did they get there? For crying out loud. Because they're in the middle of nowhere. So when the ark offloaded, all the animals went their separate ways, and no doubt God produced more through their birthing than normal phase to repopulate the earth. And I can imagine. And so when all the animals spread around, they went to their own particular places. But then we see that the continents, the water subsided, continents divided. So before the continents divided, well, I'm not a scientist, but I can only assume and through theory and conjecture how it all came about. But as anyone else can. But God initiated the flood because of man's sin. Some things we just have to take on faith. We know they're there. We don't know the answers to everything. And we may never know the answers to everything. It's the mystery of it. Sometimes the wonderfulness of it. We may never know the precise event that God used or allowed to physically trigger the flood. However, once it started, other events must have occurred whose consequences or wreckage we can still see. Examples include the jigsaw fit of the continents, as I was just talking about, the rapid burial or preservation of trillions upon trillions of fossils in layered rocks, marine fossils on every major mountain range, crumpled mountains, coal, oil, and methane deposits, frozen mammoths, strange features on the ocean floor, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, the ring of fire, the Earth's core, gouged out canyons, of course, and the chondrules, comets, asteroids, and meteorites. It's the Earth which causes the Earth's radioactivity and hundreds of other consequences. One can place these events in a cause and effect sequence that, number one, conforms to scientific laws, number two, explains details of these observations, and three, provides a greater understanding of this global cataclysm. That is the purpose of the hydroplate theory. And honestly, it's better than any other theory I've ever heard. Which I haven't heard too many theories from the evolutionary side other than there's a big bang and everything, boom, here we are. The following, well, it's a little more intricate than that, but none of them ever seem to make a whole lot of sense. The following verses speak of events similar to those described in the hydroplate theory. Taken collectively, they provide support for the statements above them in bold. Some passages may be metaphors referring to ancient demonstrations of God's power. Number one, large quantities of subterranean water existed in the ancient past. For example, Psalm 24:2, he has founded it, the earth, upon the seas. Psalms 33:7, a storehouse is a closed container that preserves something you may use later. God used that water when it was brought forth as a flood. Many storehouses or interconnected chambers held the subterranean water. Psalm 104:3, he lays the beams of his upper chambers in the waters. Pillars were formed. Psalm 136:6, he spread out the earth above the waters. 2 Peter 3:5, the earth was formed out of water and by water. Number 2, these subterranean waters under extreme pressure burst forth, bringing on the flood. And we see that in Genesis 7:11 through 12. The fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were opened, and rain fell. Job 33:8 through 11, who enclosed the sea with doors? When bursting forth, it went out from the womb. When I made a cloud its garment. Psalm 18:15, the channels of water appeared, and the foundations of the world were laid bare. Proverbs 3:20, the deeps were broken up, and the skies dripped dew. Now, some supercritical subterranean water is still jetting up from beneath the ocean floor. And 2, Job 38:16, have you entered into the springs of the sea? Subterranean water still flow up into the ocean. Number 4, the deepest recesses on the ocean floor are trenches. Job 38:16, or have you walked in the recesses of the deep? And number 5, a massive hailstorm occurred. Exodus 9:18 through 24, or 18 and 24, I will send a very heavy hail, such as not been seen in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. So there was hail, and fire flashing continually in the midst of the hail, very severe, such as had not been in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. This could mean that an even larger hail and lightning storm than the one God inflicted on Pharaoh occurred before Egypt became a nation. If so, that more powerful hail and lightning storm was presumably during the flood. Number 6, after 40 days and 40 nights, the avalanche of rain, Geshem rain as it's referred to, stopped because the layer of water rising on the earth reached a tipping point and suddenly poured into and suppressed the high jetting of the fountains of the great deep. However, high-pressure subterranean waters continued to gush out and add to the rising flood water. On the 150th day, floodwaters covered all pre-flood mountains. Then the floodgates were closed by the hydroplates slowly settling onto the chamber floor, pinching shut the outward flowing water. Genesis 7:12 says, and the Geshem rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. 7:18 through 19 and 24, and the water prevailed and increased greatly. So all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered, and the waters prevailed for 150 days. And Genesis 8:2, also the fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained. Now, during the compression event, the continents crushed, buckled, and thickened, and mountains dramatically rose in less than an hour. Then the floodwaters receded. Psalm 104:6 through 9, the waters were standing above the mountains. At thy rebuke they fled. At the sound of thy thunder they hurried away. The mountains rose, and the valleys sank down to the place where thou didst establish for them. Thou didst set a boundary that they, the waters, may not pass over, that they may not return to cover the earth. Proverbs 8:22 through 29 contains a possible description of some very early events in Earth's history as well. And number 8, I'm trying to hurry through these. I'm not going to finish these. Before the flood, the Earth probably had a 360-day year and a 30-day lunar month. And we will address that next time because we are running out of time once more. There was a lot of information, and it was hard. I wasn't sure how I was going to explain it. It's when you're reading it, and you're going to envision it, to try and explain it, sometimes it's another process. But I just thank you all for joining us and pray that you will all be safe throughout the week. And I pray also that you are gaining from this and garnering some useful information from all of this. And I would love to hear your comments or any feedback from you. If you call the station and ask questions, if there are anything things that you want to know or questions you may ask or comments, please let us know at Chaplain's Corner on kkvv.com at 10:60 a.m. God bless you.
Thanks for joining us here today at the Chaplain's Corner. We hope today that you've been inspired and encouraged to learn more about God's Word, to step out in faith and strengthen your walk with the Holy Spirit. If you're not sure what a personal relationship with Jesus Christ means and you would like to, please contact this station and leave your information so I can discuss what that means with you personally. And that number is 702-731-5588. That's 702-731-5588. And if you're looking for a great home church, come join us on Sunday mornings at First Baptist Church on 4400 West Oakey Boulevard, where Christ is honored and the Bible is preached. This is Chaplain Randall, and until next time, may God keep you in His loving care. Shalom, and God bless you.